Alright, vlog 3 of part 3 of Crime and Punishment. So, in chapter 5, we see how Raskolnikov makes reference or talks about the Superman theory. The Superman, a Superman, is basically the same as an extraordinary man for Raskolnikov. And an extraordinary man is someone who can break the laws that are already established and the morals as well, and be able to create new ones. So, these decisions can be used to save humankind, which is sort of what we saw in Watchmen, where Ozymandias sacrifices a bunch of people, like a lot of people, to save even more lives. So that's sort of what an extraordinary man can do. This can obviously lead to murder, and it's mostly the reason he uses to explain his murder, the murder he committed, and why it's justifiable. So, often you sacrifice, well, a lot of people, but to save even more people. He makes reference to Napoleon as he is remembered as a very, well, as a good, well, maybe not a good person, but he was a good leader. He accomplished quite a lot of things, and that's not, like, I mean, they say all of this even though he killed a lot of civilians and soldiers, not in the sense that he killed them on purpose, like he sent them to war, for example, and he sacrificed them, but to save even more people. So, for Raskolnikov, Napoleon was an extraordinary man, and there's many more. He just uses Napoleon as the example. During this conversation with Porfiry about Raskolnikov's article, Razumihin asks Raskolnikov if he considers himself to be an extraordinary man who is allowed to commit crimes such as murder. He obviously asked this not in a very serious sense, because he doesn't want to make Raskolnikov look like he actually killed Alyona, because all this time he's been trying to defend him, and we see this throughout the whole part 3, I think, yeah. And he's always been helping Raskolnikov. So Raskolnikov doesn't really answer the question as to say, yes, I consider, or no, I don't consider myself to be an extraordinary man. He actually says that even if he was an extraordinary man, if he considered himself one, he wouldn't tell anyone. So he wouldn't make it public per se. Him saying this, I think, causes suspicion to be raised, not maybe so much for Razumihin, but for Porfiry, because he says, well, he's trying to hide something by saying this answer, so that's what I think. But when he answers this, he thinks, and he doubts. He doesn't really know if he's actually an ordinary or an extraordinary man. He also mentions during his answer that he's not Napoleon, and he wouldn't be able to do what Napoleon was. So that sort of answers the question by saying, I'm not an extraordinary man. So I'm not an ordinary man, but I'm not an extraordinary man. I'm close to an extraordinary man, but I'm not Napoleon, so that doesn't make me an extraordinary man. So that's the first thing. That's the first thing that we see in chapter 5. Alright, so in part 3 we also see another important event, which is that Raskolnikov and Razumihin are already walking back from Porfiry's office. This is in chapter 6, at the beginning, I believe. And Razumihin goes to meet with Pulcheria and Sonia, and Raskolnikov tells him he's going to go back home. Raskolnikov meets the porter, and the porter tells him that a man was looking for him. So he goes out onto the street, and he sees the man that was looking for him. He goes up to him and tries to see what's wrong. Why was he looking for him? This man then suddenly yells, "Murderer," and looks at him like in a cold manner. Like he looks at him very seriously, as if he really meant it, like not joking or anything. So he's an actual murderer. Raskolnikov is completely confused. He doesn't know what just happened. He gets pretty nervous, and he's flushed with anxiety because he's like, how could he know that I'm the murderer? He thinks that he's the murderer, so how does he know? Now, he starts to wonder about this accusation when he goes back home, and he also combines it with Porfiry's accusations and how suspicious Porfiry was acting towards Raskolnikov about the murder. He tries to calm down by saying that Alyona's life was meaningless, it was worthless, so killing her wouldn't change anything, it didn't matter. But at the same time, he questions why he committed the murder, his motives for committing the murder. So he starts doubting whether he's an extraordinary or an ordinary man. And as we saw before, he feels he has reached a new low. So until then, Raskolnikov thought that the murder was justified, even how he felt with everything he done. He felt very guilty. He wanted to confess, and well, in the end, he thought it was justifiable, so he wasn't going to confess anymore. But after this, he starts questioning himself, and this is very important. As we just saw in the clip, that was a representation, a real-life representation, and very accurate, of Raskolnikov's dream. If you didn't understand, I mean, it was super accurate, then Raskolnikov he's following the man that yelled at him murderer, and he follows him and ends up in Alyona's apartment. He hears someone laughing in a room, so he goes in and he sees Alyona sitting there. He immediately tries to kill her again with the axe, but he sees he doesn't do any damage to her. He hits her, but nothing happens. So I think it says it was like he was hitting wood. And well, he then leaves because she keeps on laughing, and as he hits her, she keeps on laughing. This is not so much a dream, but more of a nightmare, because I think it was sort of scary for Raskolnikov. And so he leaves the building, and a bunch of people are watching him, and watching what he just did. That's when the dream ends, and, well, this dream views the crime as, I would call it, the last event to prove that Raskolnikov is actually not an extraordinary man. Or maybe not the last event, but it's key to proving that. Because we see that as he hits Alyona, he doesn't deal any damage, which means he is weak. And she's laughing at him, which makes him look pathetic. She views him as someone who's pathetic. So we see that Raskolnikov is capable of being a murderer, but not a strong man. What this proves is that he isn't a Superman or an extraordinary man. By Superman, I mean the man in the Superman theory, not the actual superhero. So that's why I say this is one of the events that lead to concluding that Raskolnikov isn't an extraordinary man, because he's viewed as, in the dream, as the murder he committed he was weak and not a strong man, and he can't deal with all the consequences that come with the murder, so therefore he isn't an extraordinary man. He can't create his own new laws, his own new morals. He can't basically create a new world. That's all for this vlog. Stay tuned for vlog number 4. This is David Apolinar signing off.